Everyday here with a tank guide for the hard mode Revanite Commanders fight in Temple of Sacrifice. This fight's sort of interesting to tank. It's very different than other fights in these instances, as there's a large focus on stunning and CCing and interrupting and otherwise just controlling large groups of adds, and somewhat a secondary focus on actually tanking bosses. The hard mode mechanics for these bosses are very similar to what they are in story mode. You have Darren, the mercenary boss, who will do tracer missile attacks on everyone in the raid, and he will do a guided missile attack that hits everyone with stacks of tracer missile. You have Lord Curse, who will do a sweeping smash attack, a large purple AoE on whoever's holding aggro on him. It does a lot of damage to anyone caught in it. And other than that, he just does a high amount of single target damage. And you have Sano, the shield boss, who will reflect damage from anyone outside his shield, and occasionally will do a very damaging kick attack that will stun and ignore whoever is holding aggro on him. Our strategy for this fight involves one of the tanks almost entirely tanking adds, CCing and stunning and otherwise controlling them, and the other tank helping with adds when there are no bosses down, and then primarily tanking bosses. For this POV, Salim is mostly doing adds, and the other tank is mostly doing bosses. Specifically to handle these bosses, we generally have the add tank pick up Lord Curse when he drops down, take the first sweeping smash, and then have the boss tank taunt Lord Curse and hold him for the rest of the fight. We do this both times he drops down, have one tank take him for the first smash, and then the other tank hold him from there. When Sano comes down, we do the same thing. We have the add tank pick up Sano and drag him over to where the Revanites, or the mercenary Revanites spawn in, and tank him until the first kick, and then the second tank pick him up and hold him until he pushes. And when Darren comes down, we have one of the tanks taunt Darren once in order to pick up several stacks of the tracer missile, and then both tanks spend the rest of their time handling adds. The exception for this is if you have a assassin or juggernaut tank. Darren's guided missile attack can be totally negated by an assassin shroud, and is actually reflected by a Juggernaut Saber Reflect. So when we have either of those classes tanking, that tank is responsible for double taunting Darren. He'll take as many stacks of the Tracer Missile debuff as he can, and then negate or reflect all of the damage using those cooldowns. Each of the bosses comes with a specific type of add. The shield boss, Sano, has Outlaw Revanites. In my opinion, these are the most dangerous. Their first attack is a stun. Their second attack after you interrupt the stun is a conal attack that does a significant amount of damage and has an infinite range. This is the one that Salim is taking right there. And after they use both of those, they will cast a healing puddle on the ground that will heal bosses for a pretty significant amount of health. So you want to make sure you're keeping bosses away from them. The Mandalorian Revanites, the one next to Salim right now, we'll do a Death from Above attack. It's a large orange circle on the ground that everyone has to move out of. And after that, they'll do an Unload attack after jumping to someone in the raid. These are a little bit trickier to control. Whereas the stun adds can be interrupted, the Mandalorian adds cannot be interrupted and cannot be taunted. And instead, the only way to interrupt their cast is by stunning them or knocking them back. The third, the type that just leapt in on the group, is a Sith Revanite. They do a large amount of single target damage, especially when they leap at someone, and they also apply a healing received debuff, like trauma in PvP, that healers can cleanse. Especially in the final burn, it's important that healers stay on top of cleansing that when it gets to 2 or more stacks, because that does get difficult to heal through. So for most of the fight, you'll see the tanks primarily just focusing on the stun adds, Outlaw Revanites, whenever they're up, picking up the Marauder adds, the Sith Revanites, whenever they leap into the group, and as much as possible stunning and knocking back the Mandalorian Revanites, or as we call them, the Death from Above adds. And basically what you're trying to do is just mitigate damage to the raid, so healers can first stay caught up, but if at all possible, help DPS the bosses. While bosses are down, we have DPS totally ignoring the adds. So once you taunt them, especially the Outlaw Revanites, it's important to taunt and turn them away from the group so their conal attack doesn't hit everyone. Once you taunt them, they'll generally stay on you, at least until all the bosses are pushed. So as I said, this is very different than other fights where a lot of your focus is on mitigating specific boss abilities, and instead you're really just trying to keep adds from getting loose. So here you'll see Salim taking Sano, the shield ad. He's dragged him over to where the Mandalorian ads spawn in, because while Sano is down, typically stun ads don't spawn. Mandalorian ads stay where they've spawned, and Sith Revanites will leap at the group. So by dragging Sano to this specific point, you can group up all the ads and then get caught in cleave damage and AoE taunts from the tanks. We take Curse here for the same reason, for the Mandalorian ads, and we generally try and keep the stun ads where they spawn. So now we've pushed into the final burn, and Salim has taken Sano, the shield boss, and you can see over in the corner the other tank has the Juggernaut boss. When the kick comes, the tanks swap. It's important to get the shield out of the middle here as soon as possible, and if at all possible, try and keep him away from the potential places for the mercenary boss to jump to. Our kill order has the mercenary boss dying first, just because he does move unpredictably and does a lot of raid damage. When the mercenary boss dies, we drag the shield boss to the middle and group him up with any adds that are alive. At this point we're using stuns, PvP grenades, AoE damage from DPS to clean up adds. And at the same time we're focusing on killing down the shield ad, or the shield boss in the middle. On every kick we're swapping, so the tank who has the Juggernaut boss is coming in and taking the shield boss, and the tank that had the shield boss, as soon as their stun wears off, is taunting the Juggernaut boss and bringing it back to the outside. Once we kill the shield boss, we keep the Juggernaut boss around the outside of the room and away from any remaining adds, because at this point stun adds healing up the boss like they almost do right here. You see the puddles on the ground. Just make the end of the fight longer and a little bit more difficult. But that's the fight. I hope you guys enjoyed tanking this as much as I do, and I hope your raid group downs it cleanly.